Once you've finished building your local WordPress site, you'll have to migrate it to a live server. To do this, you'll need a hosting account and a domain name. If you don't have one already, you could go to webhostingforstudents.com, which is one of Treehouse's hosting partners. We'll click to sign up, find a domain name, which I'm going to pick a long one, but pretty descriptive of the project we have. Click to continue, and make sure, if you are a Treehouse student, that you use the promo code TREEHOUSE for an extra discount. Once I've completed signing up for my new hosting account and domain name, I'll receive information that I need to FTP into my account and to log into the control panel. I'll assume at this point in your WordPress development that you know how to set up FTP software and log into cPanel. Once we're able to log in with FTP, we'll select all the files from our local WordPress install and drag them over into our public HTML folder on our server. This process may take a little while, so while the upload is running, we'll come into cPanel and look for MySQL, and go ahead and create a new MySQL database, in this case using the wizard. We'll use the name localwp, but notice that it's going to have another name coming before it with an underscore. Same for WP user, and we'll put in our password and go ahead and create the user. We'll then make sure that they have all privileges. And finally, take note of the final username and database name, since we'll need this to edit our configuration file for WordPress. Let's come back now into MAMP and click on Open Start Page. We'll navigate into phpMyAdmin and click on the database that we've been using. And along the top, we'll click to export this content. We'll do a custom export with everything selected, and it's saved as an output file to text. We should then have our database successfully backed up, and we can come back into cPanel and search for phpMyAdmin. We can now click into our new database that we created and import the file that we just exported from our local development. We should now see all of our database information successfully stored on our live server. We can now come back into our FTP software and look for our WP config file, which we'll open up and edit. We'll notice that it still has all of the database information that we had from our local site. So we need to update this with our new live database information. I'm going to come back into cPanel and into the MySQL Databases section and copy and paste these names just so I make sure I get them right. Now, the one extra thing we're going to do is underneath the define db collate, we're going to define a new constant that tells the WordPress install what the URL is for the site. Since in local development, we had our site located inside of a local host folder, which was also part of the URL, we need to tell WordPress that it's now going to be located somewhere else. We'll do this by defining WP home and then pasting in the new URL to the site. Make sure to leave off any trailing slashes at the end you may have. We'll then copy this again and change it to read WP site URL. This is a really simple way to help change the URL for your WordPress site while you're migrating it. We'll then close this down and come back to our live site. I could see that it's up and running, and if I go to log in, oops, it looks like a strange redirect is happening here because I left off of the HTTP as part of the URL. So I'll come back into FileZilla, reopen my file, and make sure that I add in the proper URL structure. We'll save that file, and now we should be able to properly log into our site. Although we're technically set up now, there's one final step that you should do, and that's to run a search and replace plugin that will run through the database and change all of the hard-coded URL references. This is particularly helpful if you have images on your site, since some of those images may still be pointing to the old file location. Since you'll notice, we haven't made any updates to URLs to reflect the change in the site within the database itself, only the configuration file. So I'm going to install the Search and Replace plugin, activate it, and then find it under Tools. I can now take the URL from my first site and replace that with the URL for my new site. Click Go, and we can see that it's found a few places where it updated the URL. We've now taken the proper steps to migrate a local site up live to live development. Now, it's quite possible that you'll continue to work on your local server, maybe editing your theme or a plugin or some other part of the site. However, remember that all of the content that's entered via the control panel is stored in the database. And when you upload and download files using FTP, you don't necessarily transfer all the information that's stored in the database. So, before you re-begin your local development, it's a good idea to pull down the freshest database from the server and install that and set that up locally on your local computer. You do that in the same way that we did with the live server, just with the reversed process.